Swift Heroes Digital is well underway, and it might be a digital event, but we do have one in-live presentation for you. Welcome Stefano Mondino from Synesthesia. How are you, Steph?
I'm fine, thanks.
Good, you look very much like a professor ready here.
Yeah, I needed the table for my stuff over here. But
perfect.
Cool.
You have a great presentation.
Thank you.
See you later.
Okay. Thank you, guys. By the way, here there's a lot of people involved in this event, so I want to personally thank all of them because they're doing a really great job for this year's event. Today, I want to talk about command line automations for your Xcode projects. And it's a strange subject that I decided to discuss with you because in my role at Synesthesia, I'm the mobile tech leader over here. I'm working the most with developers from iOS, of course, but also with Android, Flutter, and React Native. And we've been facing some challenges when we had to deal with complex projects when new developers were joining every project every day. There's always something difficult to implement and to set up when a new developers first come on a new project. So I came up with a strategy with some kind of automated tools that we can pipeline in our environment in order to have a smoother experience for the developer. Stuff I'd like to automate when I'm dealing with Xcode projects are like project environment creation, such as all the tools you need to firstly set up your project. The proper setup for your Xcode project file, which is always a mess, like we'll see in a minute. What I call the beautification of our code, I mean linting and formatting our Swift code so that it's always with the same style. And also some automation related to resources and, I don't know, strings, images, and whatsoever, so that we don't have to remember the identifiers, the raw string identifiers all over our code. So, first thing I want to talk about is what should I do when I check out a new project? I mean, how can I make sure that a new developer, or most important, a continuous integration and continuous delivery machine in the cloud is ready to run and to handle my project when the first checkout from Git is happening? What I call environmental tools, not needed to the compilation part. I mean, not pods, not external dependencies, but the tools that I need to install those dependencies. First question, is Cocoapods available on a developer machine? Of course, the answer is probably yes if you're developing for iOS, but what about the version I'm using with Cocoapods? What about Fastlane? What about stuff like that? What about when I'm working with a colleague on the same project and we have already installed the pods in our project? What happens when I commit to Git and he commits to Git? We check out our source codes with the pods already installed and try to run the project. Sometimes we get this ugly message telling us that the pod file lock is not in sync because we are using different version on Cocoapods, because usually we install the pod version on our system on the shared system directory with the single version. And this is not ideal sometimes because we want to be sure that we use all the same version. And the solution to this and to other gem tools we may use, like I said, Fastlane and others, is to use a gem file. A gem file is a kind of copy of a pod file because it's a container for all the Ruby dependencies needed by our environment and our project. And to use a gem file, we have to install a special gem system-wide in the system called bundler, which is usually installed by running once gem install bundler, and by prepending bundle exec before every gem command we will want to use. For instance, bundle exec pod install. In this way, if we have a gem file in our project, we will be sure that the version of Cocoapods or whatever tool we may need will be the same across version. This is how a gem file looks like. It's really, really simple. It's a Ruby file, when I can list all my gems, my plugins. In this case, I'm telling him to use Fastlane, Cocoapods, and Xcode install. I'm not discussing what they mean right now, unless, of course, Cocoapods. And I can also, for Fastlane, for instance, script with Ruby some external rules. In this case, I'm telling my environment to use a special file called plugin file in the Fastlane folder. This is kind of standard if you're using Fastlane for automations and for continuous integration and delivery. And this is about Ruby files. But what about other tools that are not distributed to Gem, to Ruby? What about Carthage? What if my project, instead of Cocoapods, is using Carthage? Or what if my project is also using Carthage besides Cocoapods? And what about SwiftLint, SwiftFormat, and any other tools I want to try to use in my project? The answer, again, is a something file, a brew file. We are going to get used to this. That is a list of dependencies installed through Homebrew, which is the standard dependency manager for macOS. In this file, that has this very simple structure, I can list every tool I need, and by running brew bundle at shell command, I can make sure that every version and every tool I need, it will be installed. Unlike the gem file, there's a little trouble by locking a specific version for different projects. You can only have one version system-wide. But it's really useful because you don't have to teach any member of your team to install every single tool you need for the project. Next, how can I chain those commands and every other command I need to set up and properly make my environment work? Because you don't want to remember every time to run bundle execpod install, bundle install, brew bundle. Sorry, I can't even remember myself. The nice thing is that you can cheat and use a Makefile, which is something used usually for a different purpose, that is building C, C++, and other kind of programming language stuff, and use it as a list of commands to be run on the shell, on the terminal. You just group commands under a label that it's called target, and simply run make name of the target. For instance, make setup. If you properly work with this Makefile and properly configure it with everything you need, it's going to be really a piece of cake to set up your whole environment, like we are going to see in a moment. Makefile are made like this. Actually, they are a little bit more complex, but for a very entry point, this is a Makefile with two targets. The second one, it's removing and cleaning the pods folder, because I don't want to mess with older pods that I have may installed in a previous checkout from Git. And the first one is running 4 commands. The first is the second target, make clean, so remove my pods. The second one is going to update the bundle through bundler and with my gem file. The third one is going to update and install the bundle through the brew file. And finally, I can install my pod and other stuff I'm going to show in a minute. And this is about the project setup, which is the complex part for the environment, especially when you're running through continuous integration environment. Like Jenkins, I don't know if you are accustomed to that, but it's kind of the hot topic of the moment to automate the delivery and the integration of builds, of mobile builds. The second thing, I had a lot of troubles in the past years working with lots of developers, is to keep in sync the Xcode project. The Xcode project is required by Xcode, as you may probably know, I guess. It's the file you open to actually see in Xcode your project. And it's a list of every file, dependencies, and whatsoever included in your project, schemes to run the application and so on. And it's all included in a single, very complex XML-like file called the PBX project file, because the Xcode project is actually a folder containing stuff. When you're working on different features on GitHub and you come up to merge them between different developers, usually if you have developed a lot of files and added stuff to your project, it's going to be a real mess to try to merge them, and you don't want that, because usually what happens is that you lose something in the process. Also, if any other developer made some error by configuring the Xcode project file, it's going to be a mess to spot it, and you risk, while you do the merge request or pull request to merge everything together, there's the chance you are going to miss it and introduce a hard bug in your system that you will spot eventually when it's too late. So how can we automate and I don't know, get rid of the Xcode project? By using tools. Again, XCodeGen is installed through Brew, like we saw before, and it's a generator, automatic Xcode project generator, completely written in Swift by Jonas Kolb and lots of contributors, and you can find it free on GitHub. It works like this. You forget about your Xcode project, and in my opinion, you can completely add to the gitignore file of your Git and remove it. Do not commit it into your source control. Then you're going to define a YAML file, which is a configuration file, easily readable. It's not, I guess, the best syntax to write configurations, but it's way better than the PBX project file you get with Xcode projects. And inside there, you can configure whatever you want, and it will be completely copied over Xcode by simply running XCodeGen on the shell command, the shell prompt. The nice thing is that if you merge and you use both Makefile and XCodeGen all together, you can define environment variables like the project name of your application, or I don't know, bundle identifiers, whatever it comes to your needs, and you can read it as variable through these YAML files. It's really, really powerful, and I'm going to show you a live demo after my presentation. So, Project YAML, this is, again, a very small part of it, but it's very core. It's made by a YAML file with the name of your projects and a list of targets you can define. For instance, here, I have an app application, so the target is going to be called app of type application for the iOS platform. You can also specify multiple platforms like macOS, watchOS, and tvOS, and it will automatically name it by appending an underscore iOS, tvOS platform at the very end of the name. I'm telling it, please take my sources from the sources/app folder, and after that, depend on an external target called framework. Sorry, an internal target called framework, called core, which is a framework. Like we can see a few lines below. We have this core. It's called, again, a framework for the iOS platform, getting its sources from the core folder. And the nice thing about that is that this is going to compile and create an Xcode project with a framework, dynamic framework, the yellow icon, just to be clear. If for some reason you find out that the framework is not the best solution for you, and maybe a static library suits better to your needs, you just have to change that kind of label and use library.statics. There's the complete list on the main site on GitHub of XCodeGen, by the way. And by simply regenerating your Xcode project, you will see the core dependency changed to static library instead of a framework. So it's really, really powerful when you have a lot of internal modules and dependencies. As we know, we have this, I don't know, this trend topic to use modular architecture with lots of frameworks. So if you need to set up in a quick way those frameworks, this is, in my opinion, the best way to do that. Obviously, it's something that comes with pros and cons, this kind of tool. The pros, like I said before, is that you stop having accidental editings and changes to your Xcode projects, because every time you commit, the other developers are going to recreate from scratch the Xcode projects, and they will not see their changes they accidentally may have done inside the project. It's way more easier to change and tweak the YAML files, and you don't have anymore the merge conflicts due to adding or removing files to folders, because as we saw before, we are only declaring the root folder of our source files, and then it's going to make everything by itself, so it's really powerful. You can use environment variables from Makefiles, and like I showed you before, it's way more easier to add custom configuration, targets, frameworks, dependencies directly for the YAML files instead of using the point-and-click interface of Xcode, which is a little bit slower and not so, I don't know, easy to use for everyone. The cons, of course, is that you are introducing a third-party dependency. It's very well maintained, but in some cases it may not be enough. So just remember that, like Brew, like Cocoapods, and whatsoever, you are adding a new tool to your tool chain, and that tool needs to be maintained. But I trust the team enough to show you this today, because they're doing a great job over it. Second thing is that it's not a conventional way to change and edit settings in your project. So you may encounter other developers used to deal with the usual way of going to build settings, build phases, add target manually, and that won't work because it won't be under source control if you don't commit the Xcode project file. So you need to teach your fellow developers and your colleagues to deal with this. The nice thing is that you can automate it with the Makefile and have it automatically complete after each checkout. So it's really powerful. Alternatives to this are Toist, Xcake, and Struct. I don't know the last two very much because they are listed on the XCodeGen webpage as alternatives. I've tried Toist, which is a great tool where you don't have the YAML file configuration, but you have a Swift file that you can code inside. I prefer, for my work, XCodeGen because it gives you more direct control all over your Xcode project file. It's not so direct in Toist because it's a way more opinionated framework, but it's worth a try, and you should definitely try it to see what tools suit your needs best. Next stuff I want to talk to you about is how can I enforce my team's code styles, because everyone codes differently. There's the never-ending war between tabs and spaces, or simply should I put self in front of every variable or not? How many white spaces should I put in my function bodies, and so on. So it will be nice to keep our code base in a very coherent way and state. And for this reason, you may probably know already two way famous tools that are Swift Format and Swift Lint. The first one is an automatic code reformatter based on general Swift convention, meaning that, like I said before, if you put self in the main body of a function where it's not needed, it's going to automatically remove it. It's really powerful to stick to conventions created by Swift. Swift Lint is a linter, meaning that its main purpose is to show you that you have warnings and error in the way you're writing code. I mean, your code may compile, but it's not written in the best way possible, and it's following convention. You will get errors and warnings in your Xcode project if you have too many white spaces, if you're, I don't know, if the naming of the classes or methods are too short or too long, and so on. It can also deal with complex stuff like cyclomatic complexity if your switches in your cases are too long and too many cases, and so on. The nice thing is that you get an autocorrection feature as a separate command, so you can mix Swift format and Swift lint all together and automatically lint all your files. If you want more information about this, this is a nice article from NSHipster, which is the Bible of our iOS developers, written by Matt Thompson, which is the master of this stuff, and I recommend it to check it out. About format and lint automations, because we are talking about automation, I want to present you a way I found by checking out the Emuni app, which is the Italian COVID-19 tracing application made by the great guys at Bending Spoons. They have the open source code base, and it's really a masterpiece of coding. They're using Makefiles, and they're using Git hooks, which is a not so popular feature of Git that allows you to do stuff automatically, command line stuff, every time you check out your project, you're committing your project, and so on. There are very different ways to do this. What I suggest you to do, actually what they've implemented in their app, is to add a pre-commit Git hooks that is run every time you're trying to commit your source. In that way, you can see what files you are changing and run Swift lint and Swift format only over them. So you always have a very nice and clever way to reformat your code with no troubles at all, and present to your coworkers a code that is clean and lint. To do that, this is a very hard to understand script if you don't know Bash like me so well, but basically it's a snippet of code that you're going to put inside your Makefile, and it will be run automatically every time you run make git setup. It's the first instruction over there. The nice thing is that since Git hooks are not committed into Git, I know it may sound strange, but it's a personal thing, the Git hooks. It's not a shared thing. So you want a way that allows you, every time you set up your project, to also add the Git hooks to your setup. So this Makefile I saw in the Emuni app is a real neat and clever way to do that. So thank you guys, by the way. Next and last topic I want to discuss: how can I statically reference my resources? With statical reference, I mean, if you're using an image from your code, you basically have two ways. Either you use the raw string that may change over time, or you create whatever enumeration struct, whatever you may need in your project, and manually insert every image you have in your assets to that enumeration, so that you can statically reference it into your code and maybe have autocompletion from Xcode. The problem is that if you go with the first path, you're going to forget every strings you're going to need when you need it. And if you go with the second path, if you need to put all together resources like images, strings and translations, I don't know, colors, fonts, and whatever, storyboards and sieves and whatever you may think about, you're going to forget all the strings. And you have to input in every enumeration every time you add something new to your project, and it's a way-consuming way of coding. So let's introduce XCodeGen. It's another tool, another third dependency, a generator of source files that take inputs from whatever folder or JSON file or whatever you may need, processes it through a stencil template, which is a template that can iterate over JSON and structures, and creates a generated Swift file in a specific generated folder. You should never edit the generated files, but they are going to be available while you're coding with the autocomplete tool of Xcode. So let's see a bunch of use cases. You can you can teach XCodeGen to create a Swift enumeration with all the images in your XC assets folder. Or you can do the same things by taking a folder and look for all the storyboards and or xibs contained inside, and have a static enumeration for that. So you don't have to mess around with the xib's name. Or you can, like I do usually, I create a JSON file with all the colors, I put a name in front of them, I don't know, background, and put the hexadecimal code on the other side of the JSON. I process it through XCodeGen and get a very useful enumeration of colors, extension over UI colors, actually, in this case. You can do the same with translation, and you're not forced to use the localizable strings file like we do before. I usually prefer to create a JSON file with strings. We'll see in a minute. And if you need it, if you can do that, you can also write your custom template and write your specific use case with that template. It's a little bit difficult to learn stencil, but once you get around it, it's way more powerful than doing everything by hand like the previous way. So I'm going to wrap up everything I told you right now. So we will start our project with a Makefile containing everything that we need to automate inside our project. In the setup phase, we're going to teach the Makefile to use every something file we may have set up in the root folder, like gem file, brew file, fast file for fastlane, cart file for Carthage, and so on. After that, we need to code our project with our colleagues, and there's the development phase where we can use the Makefile to teach XCodeGen to recompile our project and to recompile our resources, our statical reference to our resources through XCodeGen and whatever other tool you may find out on the net. Or why not? You should also write your own tool like we did in Synesthesia. You can write your whatever tool you may need. It's a very clever way to get around difficult jobs and tasks. And finally, when you have to share the code with your colleagues and with your team, and to put the source code inside GitHub or whatever Git provider you're using, you need to run a pass of Swift format and Swift lint to get rid of all the errors, the styling issues that your code may have. So I'd like now to do myself some harm and try a live demo about everything I showed you at the moment. You can check out the code from this repository I've opened some days ago. Let's see what we can do. So I'm going to, okay. And in the meantime, I'm seeing your comments. I love that someone actually loves XCodeGen. I love it too. Okay. Oh, it's Leo, by the way. Okay, so let's start with a demo. I'm going to check out that repository from my code. By the way, the slides will be available. Don't worry. We can start over, and you can see in a slower way whenever you want. And by the way, I'm always available to chat, so don't be shy. Just ask me if you have questions. I always love to discuss with everyone. So let's start with checking out the project. Okay, and go inside the folder. So we have a fresh folder. Just check out from Xcode. Let's see what's inside. I'm going to use for a minute Visual Studio Code and then switch over to Xcode. So over here, this is my project. We have our gem file. I've commented out fastlane because it's going to take a lot to install, so I'm such in a hurry at the moment, so I don't have time for that. But we have Cocoapods right here. And in the brew file, I'm telling my environment to install XCodeGen, Swift lint, Swift format, and XCodeGen. Everything we saw before in this talk. Next, of course, I have a pod file. I'm using environment variables for the target names. We'll see that in a minute. Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. Hope you can read it, everything. Sorry for this inconvenience. Okay. And the final, the most important thing I think you may want to see, it's the Makefile, where I have two environment variables declared and exported that are the main app name and project name, and the bundle identifier, com new app identifier. I hope it's not taken. It will, I guess. And the default goal, it's a nice feature of Makefiles and Make that allows you to automatically run this target, this is the project one, by simply typing make at command line within a minute. Then, in the project target, I'm automatically generating the XCodeGen project and installing the pods because I need the workspace because I'm using Cocoapods. Next target, I'm making my resources, so creating the generated file if it's not present, the generated folder if it's not present, and running SwiftGen over that. If I want to install my dependencies, I can write make dependencies and automatically run make pod install with the --repo-update because sometimes in continuous integration you have to get your Cocoapods installation up to date with whatever it may have been released by developers of Cocoapods. Next, if I want to update my dependencies, I can run the pod update. Why I have declared the two targets? Just because people tend to forget about this bundle exec that it's going to use the proper version of the gem Cocoapods inside my project. So that's why I like to wrap them inside a target. And also because if you have a mix of Carthage and Cocoapods, you can have one command that will update or install the dependency in one time. Next, this is the clean target, meaning, what do I mean with cleaning? Clean up the Xcode project, whatever Xcode project you may have, whatever workspace you may have, and clean up the pods folder because I want to install it from scratch. This is a utility to automatically format every file, format meaning lint and beautify your code with Swift format and Swift lint in all your sources. And finally, the make setup phase where I clean the project, tell bundle that I want to use the vendor/bundle local path for gems. I update my bundle to the latest version, and I'm using update instead of install because for gems and specifically for Fastlane, it's always a nice idea to update Fastlane to the latest version if you're doing continuous integration stuff, because the team is very active and updating with a new release almost every day, I guess. The guys behind that are amazing. They super quick in fixing bugs and introducing new stuff, and also adapting to whatever Apple changes in the API with the App Store Connect and the developer portal. So I prefer to use a bundle update. Next, Brew bundle. Actually, the previous line is way better, but for this demo, it's going to take a little bit more time, so I'm going to be quicker and simply run Brew bundle. Sorry. Then I want to set up my Git with the script I showed you before to automatically lint new files inside my Git commit, and this is how I'm doing it. And finally, automatically call make project over here to automatically create the Xcode project, because as you can see from here, the project you are going to check out from Git has no Xcode project into source control. So let's see what happens if I run make setup. Yeah, you should see that now. Okay, let's see what happens. Make clean and remove everything. Next, try to install into vendor bundle all the dependencies. Unfortunately, Cocoapods has a lot of dependencies. It's going to take a moment, but don't worry, it will end up in a minute. Once you have a local vendor bundle folder, this very specific phase is going to be way more quicker. It also depends on your internet connection. Now, once this thing will end, you will see the Brew bundle install phase Now, on my computer, here it is. On my computer, I already have those stuff installed, so it's going to be really quick. Next is evaluating the pre-commit script and installing a local Git hook on pre-commit phase. We'll see in a minute. Creating the generated folder if it's not present. Actually, I decided to commit it into source control, but it's up to you whether to do that or not. Running XCodeGen, which is telling me, hey, I'm not changing anything in your generated files. Finally, here we have the Xcode generation phase, and my project is going to be generated. You can see that in the background in Visual Studio Code here, where I have the app and the app workspace. Why the workspace? Because the pod install phase completed successfully. I'm installing two dependencies, which are the two I use the most, but they are here just for the sake of this demo presentation. I'm not using Almofire or Alex Swift in this project. Finally, it's telling me, hey, you can open your workspace because we are done here. And if I open my workspace, I like to remember open star space because in my head it's open space. It's way easy to remember. And over here, okay, we have Xcode. I'm going to try to enlarge the code in a minute. Okay. So as you can see, I didn't show you the project YAML file. Let's check it out. I have a project name, $app name. Why this is app name? Because it's taken from the Makefile, the app. And as you can see, probably not, but trust me, there's the app written here. This is being taken over by the Makefile and made available to all your project. Next, I'm telling my project that I want 4 configurations, 2 for debug and 2 for release. One is called devel and one is called prod, because usually in apps we have multiple environments. I don't like to use a target for each environment in the app because it's a mess when you're using storybots and xib and for many other reasons, but I prefer to have different configurations and define Swift active compilation conditions for each configuration. And this is the way I'm doing that. Next, I'm telling I want IT Synesthesia as bundle prefix for stuff, create intermediate group. This is a way standard stuff to use. Most important is I want iOS 12. I'm not using a Swift UI and scene delegates and whatsoever in this demo. Sorry about that, but you will have lots of other talks to learn about that today. File groups means that I want these 3 files, Makefile, project, and configuration in my root folder, but not included in any target. And next, I'm defining my app target from the name in the Makefile, like I did with the project. I'm taking the sources from the sources app. Oh, I have a question. This is actually a very good question I am seeing over here in Brella, and the answer, I am using RVM, and I'm going to explain that in a Q&A after the talk. Sorry. Okay. Like I said, I'm using the sources/app folder for my sources, and I'm telling Xcode that I want to use 2 schemas, one for devel and one for prod. If you have the matching between devel here and devel over there, I can automatically generate 2 schemas over here, as you can see. The app devel and the app production. I can also set up a bunch of scripts over here, and I can tell, hey, I want a dependency that is the core one, it's called core, that is down here. So automatically I will have my app linking properly to the core without having to remember if I have only to link it or to statically embed it and write all the phases. So it's really a nice way to do that. And finally, I can also specify a product bundle identifier taken from environment variables. And if you take a look over here in the project build settings, only the customized one. Down here, we have devel debug and prod debug, like I've explained and defined in my project YAML. It's very powerful tool. And also in my app, I have the com new app identifier here, and com new app identifier framework over there. Because I have a question I try to answer live. I'm including in my project because it's way easier to edit my project YAML file, because if I want to add a second workspace, I can easily clone it and without having to close everything every time. So let's take a look at the structure. I only have an app delegate and a view controller right here. And I'm going to use a simulator and try to run the application in the meantime. So as you can see, I have a view controller that it's using a background color, but we don't have the background variable in UI color natively. This is because I'm using the generated folder. And as you can see, with this template provided by XCodeGen, I can also have previews of my colors, which is a very nice way to, when, of course, you have a complete project with a lot of colors, to quickly identify every color and its what color does it match in the actual in the reality. When I have to reference it in my code, the nice thing is that I can just type uicolor.main-description. Same thing for assets. This file is way complex to look at, but you don't have to ever see it or edit it, because it's going to be automatically generated. So the nice thing is that if I'm going to my view controller and I want to change my root image, which is, by the way, over here, and it's just a heart, I can change it to other names, oops, sorry, like, I don't know, movie. Because in my assets folder, I have, let's try like this, I have a lot of different images with their names. So what XCodeGen is doing in this script is to taking every single name in my Xcode in XC assets folder and creating an enumeration and a quick way to access it through code. In this way, if tomorrow someone is going to delete completely the movie assets from my code, from my assets, the code won't compile anymore. So it's a nice way to spot errors and to correct your code and keep it into a nice and clean state. Okay. I also have something regarding translations, because it's I decided to use a JSON instead of the usual localizable file, so that we can have generated all these strings inside. It's called strings.generic.hello. And then you call the translation methods over it, and you get the translation of it over the app. Sorry about this. So this hello is actually coming from here. Okay. Next, I want to show you another thing. I'm going to close my project. Oh, sorry. I'm going to simply change my my project name, and I'm going to call it Swift Heroes 2020. I'm going to close the project and rerun here make setup, and in a moment it's going to automatically update itself and change my project name. So if I run open space again, my app is now called in a different way, with targets and with no edit at all needed in this process. And finally, I want to show you the last thing, that is Swift lint and XCodeGen. So Swift lint, it's configured in two ways. First one is to make sure that every time you compile the code, you get a warning telling you, hey, you did something wrong with the style of the code. So I just added 3 white spaces over here, and in a moment is going to recreate my project. And I'm going to see a warning in my code telling me that, hey man, you should maybe change this, because there's no way of having, here we are. You have too many spaces, you have 3 spaces, so please get rid of them. Next, I want to add a self in front of this view declaration inside my view controller. We know it's not wrong. We always use self inside of in front of declaration. But the cleanest way of writing Swift code doesn't need to have this self. It's useless. So if I run Swift format from my command line, Swift format. Make format, because I want to use the Makefile. I see a bunch of errors corrected, and if I come back over here, I still seeing the warning because I need to compile again, and I will do in a moment, but the self is gone, and the 3 spaces are gone. Let's try to commit this over Git by re-adding it, resaving it, and git add dot every file, I don't want to mess around, and git commit random message. So let's run this command, and as you can see, it's not immediate. I'm running automatically upon commit a lot of stuff over here, telling me that I had to format one-on-one files and linked the view controller file over here. And if you take a look back, you get a properly formatted file already committed into Git. So I think that for me, for tomorrow, it's more than enough, and I really hope that you like this presentation. And if you have any questions, we have time for some Q&A live. If you just want to use Brella and use the chat, maybe we have some kind of delay, but it's going to work. Otherwise, I will be available the 2 days of the conference. And by the way, if you want to book an appointment, a meeting with me, don't hesitate. I really love to talk to other developers. I could spend hours talking about this stuff. And actually, I have a first question from before. One of you asked me how I am dealing with Ruby environment. So I usually use a Ruby manager that is called RVM. Basically, I want to use a specific version of Ruby into my code, and that's why I install it on every machine of my developers and my continuous integration machines. You can also use RBenv, it's the same. It's important to try to use that. Check out rvm.io on how to use an RVM manager for your code. I didn't include it in the slide because it's a little bit overwhelming to explain in such a small amount of time. Next question is from Ovidio. How do you use or automate the build number or the version number with XCodeGen? Oh, this is a very nice question, and it will require me to go by memory. But actually, if I remember correctly, you just have to use marketing version over here and put, I don't know, 1.2.3 for the next version, and this is the Swift, the CF bundle version short description, something like that. It's what your user are going to see on your project when it's live on the App Store. And for the bundles, for the build number, I don't use usually XCodeGen, but I prefer to use the Jenkins instance we are using for our builds and use the number from Jenkins to drive the build number by using Fastlane. So actually, I have a Jenkins instance with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers every time I run a build. And I take that number and I flash it into the plist file using Fastlane. There's a tool for that. It's called, I don't remember in this moment, sorry, but it's increment build number, I think it's called. And it's the way I prefer to deal with this kind of stuff. So it was actually a good question because you can automate it, but I don't find it useful to have the true build number in my development phase, and I prefer to have it the continuous integration and delivery deal with that. Next question, can we customize the Swift lint and Swift format scripts as per my convenience? Of course you can. Oh yes, and I'm going to show that in Visual Studio Code over here. You get 2 files that are Swift format. I'm excluding pods and the generated folder for Swift format. You can also use, I think, for Swift format and SwiftLint a specific configuration file. You just have to add the -- config path or something like that to the command in the Makefile. For SwiftLint, you can do whatever you want. This is a very customized YAML file that I use in my project. I'm ditching the pods and Carthage folders. I'm only using the sources. And also, I'm telling that I want for an error after a body of 4 lines and going on. Thank you. I have the assistance over here. That's the actual fast lane action. Thank you, Federico. Thank you very much. It's actually a nice way to do talks over here with the interaction from the audience. You should do that more often, also when we get back live. XCodeGen plays with xconfig file. Okay, another great question. Actually, I don't know, because I think you can use them by simply including in your folder, but since you can, sorry, in a moment, let me open it. Since you can use this configuration over here, it's basically replacing all your xcconfig files. So you can use this instead of the other ones if this suits you. Otherwise, I suggest you to check out the documentation in XCodeGen, and there's plenty of stuff over there you can check out. Next question: how can I handle multiple targets with XCodeGen? It's actually not a problem. You simply duplicate targets over here. YAML, it's very sensitive to spacing, so play nice. What's your name? Moin. Okay. I'm just going to add a second target and run, sorry, make setup again, or make project. Okay, my coworker is making fun of me. I don't know, Flavio. You can debug it if you want. It's you can take care of that. It's just an inside joke. Okay, and in Xcode, I have to close the previous one, and just to see that it's working, open space again, and I have Moin over here with its very personal target. Any other question, guys? I'm available if you want, and otherwise, I think my time here is up. So after me, there's going to be a great talk about Peter Steinberger, which is kind of a, I don't know, a role model for me, meaning that I'm following him since I started Swift, actually Objective-C way back in the days. So I want to thank him, of course, for all the work he's done, and please follow his talk because it's going to be amazing about Swift UI. Thank you very much, and hopefully see you next year live in Torino. Bye-bye. Thank you.